Nobody knows New Zealand is open again, and it's up to business to tell them, Rachel Smalley writes this week. And Rachel, this is actually the idea of Ross McEwan, the NAB CEO. Tell us about your catch up with him.
Yeah, I went to Wellington this week for the Trans-Tasman Business Circle lunch, and Ross was the guest speaker there. He came over, I think, for a board meeting, but he is a Kiwi. He's got land or a property, I think, in Hawke's Bay, lives in Victoria now. But he addressed the business circle about what he deemed that the two countries could do. And he said, we need to be working better together. And he noted that between Australia and New Zealand, the other two countries have had the longest period of lockdown. And he felt that the world didn't really know that both countries were really open for business, to a lesser degree Australia, but very much New Zealand. And he said, it was very much up to the government to certainly be getting that message out there. But in lieu of that, he said businesses needed to come together and really ignite and make sure the world knew that they were open for business to try and get productivity and, these economies going.
Right, so it's kind of marketing 101, isn't it? You don't just build a website and expect them to come. You've actually got to promote yourself.
That's right. So they've changed the immigration settings, and we've gone out looking for skilled migrants. But and Ross McEwan spoke to this. He said, when you think about the body of work that we are in the space now, and we're going to need going forward as well, the electrification, if you like, of our economy and the decarbonisation of it. Where are we? And he said this for both countries, but in particular New Zealand, where are we in terms of trying to get that skilled labour and get some of those really intelligent people, well-educated people who are very learned in this space to come into New Zealand, and developing them in the education system here as well, that they can meet the needs of the workforce of not just today, but also tomorrow. And, that comes down to immigration. But as he said, and I think, when you look at some of our visa processing times and things at the moment, if they're interested in coming here, it certainly doesn't look like that in terms of visa applications. And we're not getting these people through in terms of visa numbers approved either.
Yeah, well, you actually quote some quite sobering statistics in your column, don't you, that we're only about halfway through all the applications we've had since July, and, it's almost November.
Absolutely. And, I think there's some 14,000 in the accredited employer visa. That's temporary visa with which you can then apply for the fast track to residency as well. And of the 14,000 that have come through since July, less than half have actually been processed. Now, you have to have a job available. You have to have proven that you can't fill that position here. Then you've got to have given a job offer to someone. They then apply for the visa. So all of this process happened, well back in the winter. And, more than half haven't been told where their visa applications are sitting. So that's a real issue. New Zealand historically has been quite good at, cracking on, I think, in this sort of space. But we're seeing burdened by bureaucracy. I think Michael Wood's doing a good job as immigration minister. He's coming off a low base. He was, he only had to improve on what Chris Harfoy was doing, which was essentially nothing. But still, they need these numbers to come to really start coming through.
And Ross was actually hoping for a bit of a trans-Tasman kōrero with the Prime Minister, wasn't he? But that didn't happen.
Yeah, I said to him, I talked to him about Anthony Albanese and how he thought that he was progressing in the role. And, hard to pick Ross McEwan's politics. Obviously, Anthony Albanese is a Labour Prime Minister. He said, I think he's the man for the job. He's doing a good job. And he said the one thing that he has given Australians, which they desperately craved, is clarity and direction and a pathway forward post-COVID. And he said that is absolutely vitally important after the almost 3 years that we've had. So he did have a meeting booked with Ardern. For whatever reason, that was cancelled. But he said, don't worry about it. I'll meet with Luxon anyway. And, he'd be an interesting man to talk to. He's operating a big business across, or big organisation, should I say, across two economies. He's got about 34,000 staff under his stewardship, enormous market cap. He has 5,500 of those staff are with BNZ. So he would be an interesting man to talk to. He said he was keen to find out from Ardern what she was going to do, how much more she was going to press in the space of letting the world know that we are open for business. But he didn't get that chance. So, I don't know, Christopher Luxon did.
Well, yeah, go for the alternative. But I mean, the thing is, of course, we compete with Australia for a lot of these skilled migrants as well. So it would be good to know where we stand in relation to what they're doing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we might learn, and I think when you look at someone like Ross McEwan, he's a Kiwi, he's living in Australia. I think he would have had some really valuable insight into that space. And what he did say was that when you're trying to grow or develop a high wage economy, then you get there by productivity. And he said, you've got to get the right people and you've got to develop careers for people. You're not just offering jobs to people. You've got to show that pathway of what's on offer in New Zealand, what it's like to live here, not just, as we've seen with the big tourism campaign, to visit here. What's New Zealand like? What's on offer here? And how do you develop careers within New Zealand? And he said that's where you'll get your productivity. That's where ultimately you'll get a higher wage economy, not simply by messing around with supply and demand.
Rachel Smalley, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Maria.